Hello, Mermaid. So I want to make a review of the paranormal show Ghost Haunted Collector that I have now finished watching, and I have a bit mixed opinions about this show because on one side it does a lot of things right, but there are a few things in it that really bugs me. So about this show, it is a show about a man named Jan Safis that goes around with his team and search out haunted objects and then either bring them to his museum for his haunted objects or find ways to contain the energy in them where they are. This show has 3 seasons and was made for Sci-Fi Channel. So let's start with the good parts. Well, the show seemed at least to be somewhat professional. It seems somewhat serious in that the team also report when they find nothing. And that is always a good sign for me in these kinds of shows. When not every investigation is met by, oh, we have a ton of evidence here. Sometimes they say, no, we don't really find anything here. And that, to me, is good. There's also not a lot of scare tactics. Basically, if you look at something like Most Haunted, there's all these elements that try to make things creepy just for the heck of it. And then I immediately get suspicious because then it sort of becomes more show than paranormal. And Haunted Collector doesn't do that. It do seem to me like the investigators are sincere and honest. So yeah, that's a good point, and that gives it a lot of credit. Does that mean that I'm absolutely sure that it's not faked? No, of course not. It's easy enough for a producer to fake these things, but to me at least, it gains more credibility than some other shows that try to make it more spooky than it has to be. So yeah, that's a good point. Now, to 2 things I really don't like about the show. One is more practical, and that is that each episode, which is about 43 minutes, deals with 2 cases. This doesn't work very well because then they have to work through those cases, so the footage, they have to basically race through it, which sort of makes the show a bit boring because you don't get to see all of those interesting details of the investigation that would make it fun. Basically, an episode is usually set up by they arriving at some place that has a paranormal problem, talking a bit about with the people that live there about their experiences. Then they go around and look for electromagnetic disturbances, as well as trying to record EVPs, and also work with a ghost box. And sometimes they use other methods as well. And then if they find some item that there seems to be EVPs around, or that they get a lot of readings with their equipment on, they generally go and check with antique dealers and such what these items are. And then they draw a conclusion and present that to the owner, that then gets to decide what should be done with the item. I will get back to problem number 2 with this in a little bit of a moment, so just hang on with me here. Now, here's my issue. If they had just had 1 case per episode, they could show a lot more of the investigation, and I think that would have made for a more interesting show than rushing through 2 cases. So, to the more problematic of these 2 concerns. there's a lot of assumptions made, because generally speaking, what I do is that I look for, they send out one investigator to see if there's been any violent deaths and so on and so forth in the area, and they just draw the conclusion that the ghost have to be one of those that died in such an event. And this to me is working, as my great grandmother used to say, with your ass backwards. Because yes, there's a greater chance of residual energy and or an actual conscious ghost when there are very traumatic experiences and a very violent death. But there's a lot of other things too that can trigger such things. For example, there can be people that has lived their whole lives and died at the ripe old age surrounded by grandchildren, and there wasn't really anything really traumatic there, but they just have problems leaving the place they loved. Or there could be somebody who stayed behind for far more mundane reasons than they were shot by a gangster. It could be people that just wanted to say a final goodbye or have a message, or somebody that are concerned with basically their also popular term, unfinished business, is something very mundane, like being able to give their favorite necklace to their child, or are concerned about the bushes in the garden. It could be very plain things too. And when basically they go around and say, what's the most violent thing that's happened around here? Oh yes, the ghost has to be you. Now, at times they do get some evidence for these hauntings they're looking for. For example, EVPs might say names and such. But at the same time, they sort of draw the conclusion. They find out that, oh, there was a violent murder here 100 years ago, so it has to be this person that was murdered, that is the ghost. How do we fit our evidence in with that? And that sort of doesn't work well, because then they are often overlooking things that can be for much simpler explanations. So yeah, they do keep their feet on the ground and don't chalk up everything to be paranormal. Like, oh, there was a sound. Well, we'll investigate this. Yeah, that window do have a tendency to move with just the slightest breeze. It's probably not paranormal. But I would have liked it even more if they kept that objectivity also when it came to identifying the ghost. Because it's not always the person that had a violent accident or a violent death or was murdered, dismembered and tortured. Sometimes it's just that old grandmother that just wanted to say goodbye to her grandkids. I think that this show would have benefited if they had a medium on the team, because it generally works only with the electrical examinations and such, as well as investigations into the history of the area. And I think that they would have gotten a lot more if they had a medium to work with, and then they could use the electronic equipment to sort of give more verification, or not, to what the medium was saying. And then, when they had that information, start investigating to see if something fit with what they had found, instead of first going and investigating and then seeing if something fit with what they have investigated. Or to say like that, let's say you go into an area and there's two methods to do this here. Either you go in, you've already checked and read up about the place and seen that there was a violent murder there in 1930, where a man was shot. And you then assume that it's this man that's the ghost. So when you are doing EVPs, you ask leading questions, you just work with this theory that it is this man, and then you just collect all the evidence you can find indicating that this is the ghost, and then present that. I think that's the wrong way to work. Instead of going in, collecting all the evidence that you can find, preferably also with a medium that can give you often more detailed information than various electronic equipment can. And then once you have done the paranormal investigation, then you go and investigate the history of an area to see if there are any historic records that can verify what both your medium and your equipment has found. That way becomes far more credible, and I haven't chosen that, and that's a shame. Other than that, I would say this is a pretty okay show. Like I said, it's rushed because they insist on doing 2 cases per episode, and that's a shame. But other than that, it's decent. But if they had done a better investigation method, it might have been an excellent show, because the participants do seem quite serious about it. And yeah, it's a good idea, but somewhat poorly executed. But it's definitely worth checking out, and it also, if nothing else, can make people think twice about just taking every sort of item, and especially antiques and such, into their homes without cleansing them first, because everything contains energy, and it's very easy to then bring something in that has an attached energy to it. It's very important when you get second-hand items, and especially things where you don't know the history of that item, such as an antique, to actually do some cleansing and protection before you bring it into your home, to prevent problems that might follow this item, because yes, energy can take a precedence in items. So yeah, I'll give this show 6 out of 10. It's pretty decent, but it's not perfect. Hope you have enjoyed this review. Have a great day, and blessed be.